Welcome to This Explainer. We are jumping right into what absolutely has to be the most audacious military bluff of 1943. We're talking about a deception so grand it saved tens of thousands of Allied lives and literally shifted the entire momentum of the Second World War. So, picture this seemingly impossible scenario. Imagine a massive espionage thriller where the key agent, the guy holding the fate of the entire Mediterranean campaign in his hands, wasn't some suave master spy. He wasn't even a soldier. He was a homeless man from London who was already dead. You have to wonder, right? How exactly does a corpse pull off the greatest bluff in military history? When you think about this matchup, it's just completely absurd. On one side, you have the impenetrable might of Hitler's forces, this massive, heavily armed Nazi war machine. And on the other side, a single, tragic, forgotten man. It sounds 100% like fiction, but this was the very real strategy known as Operation Mincemeat. Section 1. The Trap at Sicily. The unavoidable bloodbath. To understand why this wild plan was even considered, we have to look at the huge strategic bottleneck the Allies were facing in the Mediterranean after securing North Africa. Winston Churchill actually hit the nail on the head when he said, "Anybody but a blind fool can see that it's Sicily." The obvious stepping stone to mainland Europe was blindingly clear to anyone looking at a map, and because it was so obvious, attacking there meant the Allies were essentially walking right into an unavoidable slaughter. And, well, Adolf Hitler wasn't blind. He knew exactly what the Allied forces were looking at, so he heavily fortified the island of Sicily, turning the whole place into an absolute fortress. To avoid a complete bloodbath, the Allies desperately needed to invent a way to make Hitler look elsewhere. They had to convince him that the attack was actually coming for Greece or Sardinia instead. Which brings us to Section 2, creating Major William Martin, the architect of the con. To solve this deadly strategic problem, two British naval intelligence officers, Ewan Montague and Ian Fleming, this same Ian Fleming who later created James Bond, pitched a completely ridiculous yet brilliant plan. The plan was basically a masterclass in deception. Step 1, secure a dead body, specifically one with fluid in the lungs. Step 2, dress him up in a high-ranking Royal Marines uniform. And Step 3, chain top-secret but entirely fake invasion plans to his wrist and drop him off the coast of neutral Spain, a place they knew for a fact was crawling with Nazi spies. So the crucial point here is their starting material. They couldn't just use anybody. They ended up finding Glyndwr Michael, a homeless Welshman with no known family who had tragically died from ingesting rat poison. Now, why him? Well, because poison leaves fluid in the lungs, which meant a Spanish coroner would likely mistake his cause of death for drowning at sea. It gave them the absolute perfect biological cover for the con. But here's the thing. They couldn't just drop a body into the ocean and expect the Nazis to buy the whole story. They had to give this guy a life, a history, a personality. They had to give him a soul. And so they created a completely fabricated persona, introducing Major William Martin. To make Major Martin undeniably human, these intelligence officers used what they call pocket litter. They quite literally filled his pockets with the relatable messiness of everyday life. They gave him a fake fiancée named Pam, complete with a photograph and a heartfelt love letter. They tossed in a receipt for an engagement ring, a really angry letter from a bank manager about his overdrafts, and even stubbed out theater tickets from a recent date. This wasn't just espionage. This was grounding a massive military strategy in deep human psychology. But all of that pocket litter was really just the dressing. The crown jewel, the actual bait, was a briefcase securely chained to his wrist. Inside was a highly classified, completely fake personal letter from one Allied general to another, and it just casually mentioned that the upcoming invasion was targeting Greece, not Sicily.
Moving right along to Section 3, baiting the hook, the drop off the coast of Spain.
With the elaborate trap meticulously set, it was time to execute, playing directly into the hands of the German intelligence network. And this incredible con played out with breathtaking speed. On April 30, 1943, a British submarine surfaced at night and dropped the body off the coast. Just hours later, a Spanish fisherman found the corpse. Days later, German spies managed to photograph the fake letters. Weeks after that, those photos reached Berlin, and Hitler actually reacted by moving his panzer divisions. By July 1943, the Allies successfully invaded Sicily. It worked like absolute clockwork. Okay, this is maybe my favorite part. To really sell the con while the body was in Spanish custody, the British leaned entirely into dramatic irony. They purposefully sent frantic, top-secret cables to their embassy in Spain, practically screaming, "We lost a courier! You must get his briefcase back, unopened!" And they did this knowing full well that the Germans were listening in on those communications. It validated the fake documents perfectly.
Which leads us to Section 4. Hitler takes the bait, shifting the war machine.
Now here is where this meticulously crafted story reaches the highest levels of command in Berlin. Despite the elaborate ruse, a lot of German generals actually retained their suspicion that the true target was still Sicily, just because it was so strategically obvious. But Adolf Hitler? He was completely sold. He was so convinced by the authenticity of the fake letters, backed up by the sheer everyday detail of that pocket letter, that he overruled his own generals and stripped Sicily of its heaviest defenses. The scale of this reaction is just staggering. Because of a fake fiancé photograph, an angry bank letter, and a dead man's briefcase, the Nazi war machine literally shifted entirely out of the Allies' way. Entire panzer divisions and torpedo boats were diverted away from Sicily and sent all the way to Greece to wait for an invasion that would never come. And that brings us to our final section, the ghost hero, the legacy of Glyndwr Michael. Let's look at the ultimate aftermath of Operation Mincemeat. Because Hitler took the bait so completely, the Allies were able to invade Sicily with only a tiny fraction of the anticipated casualties. What was originally projected to be a devastating bloodbath turned into a massive strategic success. It saved countless lives and led directly to the fall of the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. The absolute triumph of the moment is perfectly captured in a legendary telegram sent back to Winston Churchill following the invasion. It simply read, "Mincemeat swallowed rod, line, and sinker." It was the ultimate confirmation of absolute success, proving for sure that the Nazis had bought the lie completely. But what about the man at the center of the whole shebang? For decades, his true identity remained a complete secret, buried in a small cemetery in Spain, under the fabricated name Major William Martin. Finally, in 1998, the British government added a postscript to that gravestone, revealing his true name, Glyndwr Michael. The man who lived in obscurity and tragedy was finally recognized for his profound contribution, saving tens of thousands of soldiers and helping bring down the Third Reich. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. Operation Mincemeat reminds us that wars aren't always won with tanks and artillery. Sometimes they're won with brilliant, audacious storytelling. It begs a fascinating question. If one of the greatest weapons in World War II was a fabricated story tucked into a dead man's pocket, how vulnerable are we to sophisticated deception today? What you should really take away from this is that narrative has profound power. Thanks for joining me on this incredible deep dive, and keep questioning the stories you see.